Thursday night. We're really happy that you're coming to support the gallery, the talk tonight. This is serious. It's an amazing comics exhibition that we have here on the first floor. Before I start, let me just recognize that we're standing here on the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat, the Erie, the Neutral, the Mississauga, and the Haudenosaunee. These Indian nations came together under an agreement called the District One Spoon Wampum. It's an agreement that is built around a very powerful and very poetic metaphor, that being that the land is akin to a bowl and or a dish, and there's one spoon that by which resources can be extracted from that land and used. And it's a delicate spoon. It's a spoon that needs to be shared between peoples and needs to be used with economy and reverence. It's a beautiful agreement, and we take the time to just think about that and be thankful that we're here tonight, congregated well, we're here for a good purpose, and just to be reverent. A few house rules about tonight's talk. We have a bathroom. You are given permission to use it at any time. It's just out the doors there and just to your left. Just so you know, the galleries, I believe, are just open until 8 tonight. So if you have a desperate need to cross-reference anything in the comics exhibition, you can also excuse yourself before that. Tonight's talk is going to last about an hour. It is being filmed for our archive. The talk will end. We'll open it up to the floor for questions. If you don't mind, and if you have a question, we want to hear it. Can you wait until I pass you a microphone? Because we'd like to pick up, oftentimes we lose the content of the question for our archive, and then we have an answer that's floating in space. And anyone who's coming to use the archive later won't know what's going on. So when we do open it up for questions, and we will have time for that, if you will please wait for the mic, that would be amazing. Tonight, look at this, I'm going off mic. Tonight's panel is being moderated by Alana Traficante. Alana is a contemporary curator, writer, and gallery director based in Toronto. She's worked in a variety of capacities here at the AGH. Most recently, she's the adjunct curator of contemporary art. She's one of the co-curators, along with Joe Ullman, of This Is Serious, Canadian indie comics. She writes researches about contemporary artists working in lens-based media and installation, but she also specializes in Canadian artist-run culture, and she has been researching indie comics since 2014. She is currently executive director of Gallery 44 for Contemporary Photography, a nonprofit artist-run center in Toronto. Please give it up for Alana Traficante, who will be tonight's moderator and will be introducing our two featured speakers.
Hi everyone, thanks so much for coming out tonight, and thanks Tor for that lovely introduction. So I'm super excited to have Julie Doucette and Fiona Smith here with us tonight. We're absolutely thrilled to have you both, so thanks for joining us for this conversation. Just to begin, I'll give an introduction, so I'll read their bios. Julie Doucette was born in Montreal in 1965, and after completing a certificate in printmaking, she focused on creating autobiographical comics, which have since been translated into several languages, including Japanese. Despite her success, Doucette abandoned comics in 1999 and went back to printmaking. She became a member of the Atelier Graph and has since produced artist books while continuing to work with words and images. And in 2009, she ventured into animated film, also working with words and images. A retrospective exhibition of her comic artwork, drawings, collage poetry, animation films, and artist books took place in 2017 at the Fumetto International Comics Festival in Lucerne. So that's Julie. And then Fiona Smith is a feminist painter, illustrator, educator, and cartoonist who's based in Toronto. In 2012, she collaborated with writer and sex educator Corey Silverberg on the Kickstarter-funded picture book, What Makes a Baby, which was later re-released by Seven Stories Press in 2013. An award-winning second book, Sex is a Funny Word, followed in 2015. Fiona has collaborated with the writer Mariko Tamaki for Secret Loves of Geek Girls, and with cartoonist Ron Reggie Jr. on Parish Plains Volume 4 for Parish Publishing. Her comics can be found in Resist number 1 and 2, edited by Francois Mouly and Nadia Spiegelman. In 2018, 30 years of Smith's comics were published in Somnambulance by Koyama Press. And Fiona teaches illustration and cartooning at OCAD and at the Art Gallery of Ontario. So for those of you who haven't yet seen the exhibition, both Julie and Fiona are featured in the Central Gallery in a section that we've called the Big Four, and we being myself and Joe Ullman, my co-curator, who I forgot to mention again. And so that's in the Enlow Gallery, which is like the big central gallery at the center of the exhibition, and that space features significant works by 4 seminal cartoonists. And those cartoonists are Seth, Chester Brown, Julie, and Fiona. And just so all of you know, Seth and Chester will be speaking here on an artist panel, which will be moderated by Joe on November 28th, so we hope that you'll join us for that too. So for the rest of the talk, I've just prepared a few questions for Julie and Fiona. So we'll start with my questions, and hopefully that will start up a bit of a discussion. And then, as Tor mentioned, we'll open up to the audience for your questions. So I'm curious to kind of start at the beginning and hear from both of you how you first came to comics as a medium. I know that you both started by publishing mini comics and zines, but I'm curious to know, like, what was happening in the Montreal and Toronto scenes in the 80s at that time that sort of ignited your interest in comics?
Well, at the time I was an art student at the university. That's where I met people, guys who were drawing comics and introduced me to fanzines because I didn't know anything about that before. I guess it inspired me of drawing comics. I grew up reading comics a lot, so I was familiar with that. I guess comics for me was just another art form to try, you know. So yeah, so I started to participate to those fanzines with those guys, and it turned out very frustrating for me because it was such a slow process of trying to get everybody together to make something out of that. And that's how I got to make my own solo fanzine. That's how it got started for me.
And so you found that working on collaborative projects was a little bit more frustrating, and it was easier to just focus on your own work?
Oh, yes. I guess there weren't that many fanzines around either. I mean, it's not like I was swamped with all sorts of different options, really. So, yeah, it was better to just do everything myself.
What about yourself, Fiona?
It was similar for me being at art school at OCA before it became a university, Ontario College of Art. Now it has the Design University added to it. And I was doing comics for the school newspaper, which is called Fish Wrap. And just starting to learn about underground comics and alternative comics through friends like Maurice Valacoup, who was a peer of mine, who showed me Raw magazine. And there was one time I was on Queen Street and I saw Yummy Fur So seeing Chester Brown's self-published, you know, it was zine format before it was being called zines, opened my eyes to that I could do that too. And so when I left school, or even before I left school, I made a name for myself as a painter. And whenever I had shows, I would make zines to go with the show. So I would have something that was affordable that people could take away. So even if they couldn't buy a painting, they could spend $1.50 on a zine, or I'd have free ones that I would give them. They had a way to travel the world that the paintings didn't.
And at that time, would you guys have been going to zine fairs? Like, was that a thing, or were you just distributing zines by way of bookshops or comic stores?
Well, there weren't any book fairs, zine fairs at the time, as far as I know. I was distributing my mini comics to bookshops and record stores. There was not really any circuit. Really. I guess in Montreal it might have been different. It seemed that it was completely empty compared to what you're describing. I didn't run into anything that exciting. Well, it's not true. There were some things, but
It was just Chester Brown's Yummy Fur. The comic book shop, and there would be a lone box next to the cash, and that was kind of it. And there was no fairs or fests like we have today. It was like, and I would just have mine at my art shows, and I didn't have the guts to take them to a shop, so I would just have them at the art shows, or carry them around with me and sell them or give them to people when I walked around.
yeah, when I think of that era, I just think of it was completely void. There was no future, no jobs, no nothing. There was no publisher. I could never have imagined ever being published. It wasn't possible. That's why I was just making fanzines. Might as well just have fun, you know. That was it.
So I know that eventually a comic scene developed out of that kind of early zine making community. So I wondered if we could talk a little bit about your experience as women and as feminist artists who sort of came up in that scene at a time when men dominated comics. I'm curious to know like what that experience was like for you, and if there was a community of women artists that were working in the art form, or any other women artists that you knew about or thought about or looked up to at the time.
No. Once again, there weren't that many women. No. Not really. I knew that I read some women cartoonists from France, but I knew they existed. I guess that's why that inspired me in some ways, knowing that it was possible as a woman to draw comics, but it was so remote. And in Montreal, there was this woman, Diana Bomsawin, who was a bit older than me, so and I really looked up to her, but I didn't know her. So. But other than that, there was just nobody around. It was guys. Only.
And Diana Obosman's work is featured in the exhibition here for those of you who may have seen it when you were coming down the corridor. There's an animated film that's on that monitor. So yeah, just to give you some reference. But about in the Toronto comic scene.
Well, of course, Toronto is famous for what I call the Holy Triumvirate, or the Toronto Three: Chester, Seth, and Joe Matt. And of course, there's Lee doing work. But yeah, everybody was kind of their own solo thing, and I always felt like an outsider from the three, even though I was a fan of their work, I've definitely been Judy's work. And so it felt like an outsider from in the comic scene because I wasn't doing autobio, which was the going genre at the time. And And also from being from Montreal originally, even though I've been there for a few years, that always made me feel like kind of an outsider, which is ironic because now I'm identified with Toronto, some of my work like Symphony East. But I would see Carol Moiswich's work. I would see Barbara Hunter, who's not a cartoonist, but a muralist and illustrator. She's done some narrative stuff as well, but not known as a cartoonist. And yeah, I was probably more aware of artists than cartoonists. And it became clear that there were women out there making work from seeing the few that you would see in Raw magazine, and the more that you would see in Weirdo, especially when Elaine Kaminsky-Crumb was editing. And in Toronto we had Casual, which had some women cartoons, which was in a zine format, which was kind of a cousin of Raw and Weirdo happening at the same time. But there wasn't collectives like we have today. There wasn't the support that exists between creators and cartoonists and zinesters, which has really grown out of digital, like social media, which has its drawbacks, but it's enlivened and enriched. You don't necessarily have to feel so alone now in being a maker in these worlds. You can find your peers, your audiences.
That's really interesting to think about social media as like a way of bringing people together in real life too. And I'm sure it's like had some influence on the formation of things like fairs and book fairs and zine fairs in terms of just sort of galvanizing people to get together and share their work in a public way. I'm interested to talk to both of you about this idea of like a durational project or a long-term project. Julie, you talked about when you first started making your own mini comic, which was Dirty Plot in 1988, and you produced that serial comic between 88 and 97. And in the catalog for the exhibition, essayist Jeet here has described that as, and I quote, a revolutionary exploration of your psyche with a focus on body issues, the interplay of desires and anxieties, fantasies, and biological imperatives. So I know you haven't been making comics for a long time, but you recently revisited this work very closely when you were producing the Complete Works, which is the large complete works that was published by John and Quarterly in 2018. So I'm curious to know, like, when you were a woman in your 20s, why did you choose to kind of diarize the character's life in this way through comics, and often through these like really fantastical stories of dreams, which I think are really lovely and interesting and have this amazing kind of lasting quality. But then also, like, what did it feel like to return to that work 3 decades later to produce the Complete Works?
I guess it's not like I meant to tell autobiographical stories. At the beginning, I just used my own character to tell stories and making fanzines. I mean, I didn't think anybody would read any of those stories, so I would put pretty much anything that would come through my mind. So that's how it was so sexual, or I mean, I was talking about all my own questionings as a woman and whatever my dreams at night I was having that were so wild and crazy. And
So you were having those wild and crazy dreams?
yeah, sure. And they were great because they were all there. Everything was there. There was a beginning, a middle, and a conclusion. So I just had to draw them. It was great. But eventually I drew autobiographical stories. It was just something else to try, I guess. I mean, it's not like I was planning anything. Really, I was just doing things all the time. So, looking back at that, it was great, of course, especially looking at the very early stuff, because I rediscovered myself as a young woman with that much tuggings of a young woman. My identity as a woman, how uncomfortable I was as a woman at a long time. And I guess it was very much, not so much about the comics, but I had to revisit everything that was around it, my old diaries. I read all that from those days, but that was quite something, because they were full of pleasures and yeah.
One of my favorite things that we've included in the show of your work is there's like the first drawing that you did that you revisited many years later. It's a really lovely moment in the exhibition that you should definitely take a moment to find if you remember after this talk. But it's the early, like one of your earliest drawings, and then you kind of revisited the sort of same staging of that drawing maybe 30 years later, right? Yeah, it's really lovely. So turning to Fiona and thinking about long-term and durational projects, you've been producing cheese for a very long time, and since 1991, is that correct? And first it was in print as a weekly from 1991 to 2002.
A month.
Pardon?
Monthly.
Monthly, sorry. And then online weekly, via the Monday Art Post blog since 2002. Is that correct? Something like that.
It's
Yeah.
like 637 now.
And the last time that Joe and I visited you in your studio, I remember that you said you were going to do this project for the rest of your life, which really stuck with me. And I wondered if you could tell us a bit about that. Like, what is it about this particular project that makes you want to make a lifetime commitment to it?
I guess it's just an ongoing sketchbook, so it's a stream of conscious drawing, and to have the constraint of having to post it every week and to meet that deadline. Although sometimes if I know I'm going to be busy, I'll do a bunch of drawings ahead of time and post them. So they might, in the past I would have just drawn them right before the deadline or the same day as the deadline. So yeah, stream of conscious, but there's you know, images and motifs I'll get stuck on, and so it has a diary feel to it. I can look through it and see what's going on in my life, and having it being public instead of just in the sketchbook, there's something significant to that. And I like numbering things, so every drawing has a number in it. To have it at such a grand number at this point, yeah, I just want to see how far I can take it. And the other constraint is that it's black and white with gray tone, so there's, you know, it's not very fussy to produce. Yeah, and it's not a commercial thing, or it's not a commission thing, or it's just whatever I want it to be.
And I guess while we're on that topic, it's probably good to mention the drawing stipend, which is the projection, which is featured in this exhibition, which is 2,200 drawings. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that as a long-term project? Or like a...
Sure. That was an Ontario Arts Council funded time-based project where I proposed I would draw the same figure over and over again over a period of a year. And in doing that, I would trace over one initial drawing and change it ever so slightly. And by the end of the year, I would have like at least 6 drawings a day. Although sometimes I did less and sometimes I did more. And it's supposed to be about cloning and how inexact cloning is, that you can copy something, but you can't replicate experience. And maybe like in relation to zines, you know, I don't know. Now I'm reading more into it, but yeah, and I love doing that project. I could have just kept doing that project too.
Yeah, it's pretty great to see it as like a complete body of work, I guess, in the way that the changes in the drawings are sort of incremental, I guess, when they're sort of shown on this slideshow. Yeah, it's a pretty incredible body of work, I have to say. Yeah, so this particular exhibition frames both of your past and present works in the genre of comics. But you both work across many disciplines, and I think that bears talking about tonight. Fiona, you came up in the Toronto scene first as a painter and an illustrator, and Julie, you stopped making comics like 20 years ago, and now you work in printmaking and collage and artist work. And because you both have this like very broad artistic practice, I'm curious to hear from you, like, what is your favorite kind of art to make? And what process do you enjoy the most? And like, what can you tell us about that and why?
Well, it's not like I have a favorite one. I guess it's my favorite when I do it. But I've been doing quite a lot of writing with cutout words, poetry written that way. I wrote my autobiography from 0 to 15 years old with cutout words. It's 200 pages, but it was in French. It was published in France. I did many little projects like that, more. The latest project was like a fumetto book with text written with cutout words, which are kind of in English, but not really. It's yeah, you have to read it out loud because it's kind of abstract. It's a sound, text, poetry, or whatever.
And that's the Carpet Speaker too?
Yeah. Yeah, I've been doing a lot of printmaking, so screen printing, small books, but it's been a while. Now I'm back to drawing mostly. Been doing animation films, but everything involves words, more or less. It's always the core of whatever I do. That's the love of my life.
Telling stories, I guess. What about you?
I guess, I started off as a painter, so in the 80s, so the dream was to have, loft like this size and make giant paintings, which has become a ludicrous dream of privilege, and you need a lot of money, and you need storage, and comics are way more contained, they can be small, and projections are even better. But I still love painting, but I never really got a chance to do it very much. Doing the mural here, but even still, it's not like a full painting. It has printouts in it. And, yeah, I mean, if I had all the money in the world, I'd probably just be painting. But I love everything else that I do, and I love teaching. Especially comics, spreading the word.
And also the book illustrations, you were saying that.
Yeah, the work with Corey Silverberg on What Makes a Baby and Sex is a Funny Word, and we're working on the third book now. So that's very, feels like very important work, and I feel blessed that I'm getting to do it. And it's work that could make a difference in the lives of kids. And, yeah, I'm excited about the next one, which is quite lengthy. It's like 420 pages, and it's more like a graphic novel, has more comics in it, obviously, for kids who are just hitting puberty. If you're not familiar with these books, they're written by a sex educator, Corey Silverberg, and they're sex ed books. But, very contemporary and LGBT. focused, and the first book doesn't mention gender and what makes a baby. Just really cutting edge and inclusive, and yeah, just so happy to be part of it.
Maybe just this is a moment when I can interject with like an unplanned question. But you mentioned teaching, so I wondered, like, do you guys both take an interest in mentoring young artists, or is that something that you, like, I know Fiona, you taught lots of students in illustration and comics at OCAD, and Julie, I wonder if you developed any sort of mentorship relationships with young artists.
We were just talking about this before we came up.
Yeah, well, an informal one, I guess. I met this one young woman in Switzerland, a 21-year-old woman who was drawing her own comic and making her own fanzine. She doesn't have a natural drawing talent, but she's a good writer and a good storyteller. And I was in Switzerland for a comic festival, so that's where I met her, and we've been corresponding since then. She's sending me her comics and all that. So that's my experience of mentoring. Other than that, not really. My approach to comics has always been very much DIY, you know. So I would really have trouble to just have somebody teach somebody how to do it. I mean, I came to it because I love reading books, writing stories. So it was very instinctive to me. So to teach it, I don't have it into me. And anyway, I'm not a very articulate person, so I don't want to get into that.
Neither am I.
But you managed to teach comics at OCAD, you know, but
yeah, so there's some folks who are in the show that have been my students, like Jen Woodall, who's in the audience, but I cannot take credit for the genius of Jen and other folks that I've taught, because they've come into the comics class with a vision and stories to tell. And so I just made a space for them to continue what they're already doing. But there is Nati Medina Romero, who's in the audience, who I mentored, who is a great artist and cartoonist, and now we're friends after a mentoring grant through Toronto Arts Council. Yeah, it's very fulfilling to share. I don't know how effective I am, but I like to do it. I have a lot of comics in my library to share, and lots of zines. So,
yeah. I know from a couple folks in the show who studied with you, they have always really wonderful things to say about you as a teacher. So, yeah. So I guess my last question is, I'm really curious to like hear what you guys have to say about this moment where there's a first ever sort of survey exhibition of Canadian comics. You know, what does that mean to you? Is it significant, or maybe it's not significant at all? And then, you know, when you look back at some of the very early drawings that are included here, and sort of think about yourself as a young artist, did you ever imagine that they would be presented and displayed in a gallery and like received and experienced by publics in this way?
Not that big, I guess. Not being such a big exhibition, and it's so wide, including, well, there are so many people I don't know in that exhibition, and I'm amazed because of that. But I guess I've been showing, well, I had this big exhibition in Switzerland at one time my own, so I had all my stuff in a huge space, so I guess that was the one big shock in my life. So that's the second one.
And I know you've shown lots of paintings, but did you ever think comics would be presented in this way in a gallery format?
I mean, there was a show, there was a casual show called the Casual Cultural Exchange in maybe like 88, 89. That was a survey of well, I guess whoever was showing in the casual zine. But it was maybe in a room that was half the size of this room, and there have been comic shows along the way. But yeah, not this scope of, you know, more established cartoonists and emerging cartoonists and showing the history of Hamilton's cartooning history. And for me personally, to be on stage with Julie and to be part of the considered the Big Four, because when I was coming up, the Big Four was the Toronto Three and Julie. So for me to be included there, it means a lot. A lot.
That's really nice to hear. We really thought it was important to include you in that area, so that's great. So I think we're all set to open it up to you guys for your questions. Is there anyone who's thinking about something in particular they want to ask? And if so, Tor will ready this mic.
I was thinking about something, but not formulated perfectly, but kind of, if you could maybe, did it feel when you were just doing your zines and art in the early days, did it feel like you were part of the Big Four moving forward comics in a new way, or was it always a struggle up until, I don't know, maybe even now, like were you flipping burgers and working libraries and bookstores? Like, when did it get easy, or was it always just difficult, and then the support was just carrying you, but you always had to work I guess I'm asking kind of the practicality of making comics and living a normal life in the city. How was that? How is it?
I've been very lucky because John Importelli published me, and when he got started, he's an artist as well, and he wanted to be very generous with his artists, so he gave a really good percentage on the sales, you know, and they got them at the same time. The Quebec Art Council was giving grants for the first time for comics, so I got one that same year. So in between the time I got the grant and I was finished with it, I could earn enough money with the comic book to live. Yeah. So, and for the whole time I was drawing comic, I could live from that. I mean, I was not living off very richly, you know. I didn't have a house and a car and all that, but enough just to stay at home and to draw and enjoy it. So I was very lucky. Yeah, when you say, is it hard or is it hard? I mean, to be an artist, it's, yeah, to make decisions, lifestyle decisions, kind of by making that choice. So yeah, for me, there's always been a day job. Even the year I started teaching at OCAD, I was working at Home Depot at the same time, and I was working on a graphic novel. It's like, I don't know how I did that, but anyway. Yeah, and over the years I've had grant support from Toronto Arts Council, Ontario Arts Council, but only in recent years from Canada Council. And it's funny because, you know, for years my proposals would be related to painting, and as soon as I shifted it from painting to drawing, then I started to get more grants. It's like, there's too many painters out there, nobody cares about painting, and then, but drawing and, especially towards narrative and towards comics, there's been more support in that direction, for sure.
Hi. I just wanted to ask, like, about comics that meant a lot to you, or comics that you discovered recently. Assuming that you both read comics still, like, I don't know. Like, I still love comics and read them, and I'm always finding things that I don't know of. And looking at your originals when we were visiting your studio was like so amazing. I was crying at times. But anyway, what I'm asking, and making a speech. Sorry. I'm one of those people. Sorry. I wanted to know, like, what? Just tell me some comics that you like that have meant a lot to you, like big comics for you, or something you've discovered recently. That's all. Sorry.
I'm so bad with names. Well, my influences were mostly French from France, like Mordecai, the Coco from Masqué. Of course, I grew up with Tintin and things like that, but later on, Chester Brown was the big, I did the influence, but I really admire his art and storytelling. I really liked your drawings and paintings and the way you drew, because they were so free and a way that I just couldn't do. It was I can't express it. I'm sorry. It's a lot from somebody whose imagery is so free but so honest. Like, yeah, your honesty is incredible in the spaces that you create on page. But the way you get so free on the page, you don't need frames, so it's completely, there's so much freedom in your pictures and even in the contents, in the sense that it doesn't have to be that narrative often. Thank you. I guess the last book I read, the last comic book I read is what I like is my favorite thing is Monsters. Yeah, that's quite something. That's crazy. I don't know how many years she spent on that book. Yes, so I quite liked it.
I made a cheap note because I just forget names. Well, yeah, Chester was hugely influential to me too. At the Happy Clown, and knowing that was drawn in stream of consciousness, like panel to panel, is like mind blowing. And Gary Cantor and Ron Weirdo, and like I said, Casual. Seeing your work, your menstrual work, which we were going to talk about menstrual stuff. So today, like I'm seeing my students' work and what they're producing. I mean, what Jen's produced is just incredible, and the connections to graphic medicine. I like a lot of the work that's coming under that umbrella. If you don't know what that is, check it out. It's work that's related to health and whatever that means. It could be mental health, physical health, caregiving, and looking towards trans folks' work and non-binary folks' work. I think it should be fascinating to all of us to hear these voices, but I think from doing work that's been very much about being female and what that means to live in a female body, to understand and read about trans experience and non-binary, it's it's very illuminating, and I feel a lot of connection to it, because being in this female body is, I feel a lot of ambivalence about it. So Tommy Parrish's work in Eli Howie. So Tommy's, I think, originally from Australia and living in Montreal now, and Eli is in Toronto. Morgan C, who's in Toronto. I love Walter Scott's work. I'm kind of reading everything. So there's lots of stuff I'll probably forget. Folks, Neil Ferris's book, which was only part 1, waiting for the second part.
Thanks for a really great talk, and such an amazing show, and it's so amazing just to hear you talk about the comics and the history of making these really unique and powerful images and words and stories. And so I guess I was wondering, it's sort of like a solitude, like you make comics, you sort of do it alone a lot, and maybe meet up with some friends who do the same thing. Was there a moment when you got a sense of an audience that you didn't expect, that was sort of emerging? Because it seems like comics have become more consumer items, like they're available, and we have a show now. And was there a moment when you started feeling that there was a shift in the type of audiences that were reading specifically this kind of comic work that was more underground and not like the superhero genres and all that stuff?
I guess I had quit comics by then. I'm afraid. Yeah. Well, because you think you talk about now? That's what you mean? I mean,
I just meant, was there a moment when you felt that more people were reading the comics than you initially expected to read them when you started making them?
well, when my comic book was being published with Drawn and Quarterly, there was always a page where I printed the readers' letters. So I would get a lot of letters from the readers, mostly guys at the beginning, but at some point there was a switch, and I started to receive a lot of letters from women. It was the guys who were showing my comics to their girlfriends, and eventually I received just as many letters from women and from men. But that was my switch. But yeah, I was amazed. I really done a lot of my trying to respond to everybody, but I just couldn't do it. It was great.
You know, walking into the Toronto Comics Art Fest, especially the last 5 years, it's just incredible how much has grown, become an international event. And also walking into a comics class, because it's mostly women. Some trans folks, some non-binary, but yeah, it used to be considered that was like the boys' class. It's not like that anymore. It doesn't mean that they're all familiar with what's presented at TCAP. There's still folks who come in who are very Marvel DC, and not to say that there's bad work being produced there, because there is experimentation and there's some good work there, but yeah, going to TCAP is just like, yeah, it's arrived. And yeah, coming to the show.
It's much better now than it used to be.
Had to censor yourself, or if, let's say, you produced work that you were concerned about putting out there into the world, or you were worried about the reception of your work, whether for your own safety or for other reasons, or if you had experiences like that?
Safety reasons, no, not at all. I guess the only way I censored myself was when it involved other people, like doing autobiographical stories. I mean, it's delicate to talk about people who are around you. I even stopped doing that because the last book I made was a diary. 365 days, it was improvised. I was drawing it 1 page a day for a year, and at the end of the year when it was published, I gave it to my friends, and they said, no, they didn't want to read it, so, so yeah, no more. I'm not going to use my friend anymore in my work.
Yeah, I think both of us are totally do not censor. But I've done a lot of illustration and commission work where I've been, I joked about this in my classes with my students and said, our directors would say, we love your work, but no erect penises or flaming vaginas. It's like, well, yeah, I mean, of course not, if this is like a piece about golfing or kids. But then I have the last laugh because now I'm drawing genitalia for kids. Sex ed. But in the early days of being an emerging painter and cartoonist and doing stuff that was labeled feminist, and I think we both agree that, yeah, we didn't like set up, like, we're going to be feminists. Like, we just did the work and then other people labeled it, and now we say, yes, it is feminist because people are afraid of that word and it's like we have to use it. But in those emerging days, I was accused of being anti-feminist because of the content, because it was so aggressively sexual, and yeah, there was a jury show in Toronto that I was rejected from because the jury thought I would offend feminists. So this would have been back in the 80s. It's a very long time ago, but it seems ridiculous. But personal safety, that hasn't, thankfully, not been an issue.
Just thinking about like the idea of censorship, and when we were putting this show together, when we were initially selecting drawings from Julie's studio, we like almost didn't include Heavy Flow, which is the 4-page comic about a woman who gets her period and like she's enraged and large like Godzilla and moving through the city like bleeding everywhere. And we were like, oh, we can't put it in the show. And then Julie was like, why can't you put it in the show? It's just a woman getting her period. And it was like this total moment of realization for me that like, you're right, like that's a completely ridiculous thing to ever think that we couldn't put it in the show. And then I was like, no, we're going to put it in the show. And then that like completely opened up how I was thinking about all kinds of work that we could include in the show. And so there's like a little bit of negotiation with the gallery on that, with sort of thinking about the different kinds of audiences, as not for period art, but for some other thing. But I wanted to thank you for convincing me that I should put that in the show. And also because I promised we would talk about period art tonight.
God, it's black and white. It's not even red.
Yeah, I just want to know if you think you have to perform an international audience, or are you addressing a Canadian audience, or maybe a Montreal, Toronto, or a women's audience? Who do you feel your primary audience is? And also, is there such a thing as a Canadian style, or is it more international? It's intermixing of different things.
Yeah, being French speaking, I know I have an audience in France, I have an audience in America, in Canada. a bit everywhere. I've been translated in different languages, so in my case, I guess it's international.
Yeah, I think it's an international. I don't know what makes something distinctly Canadian. I mean, if you look at the breadth of what's shared in this show, yeah, it's not for everybody. Not everybody's going to connect to it, but there is an audience out there for every single person that's in the show.
You guys both talked about your passion for like international art, and I'm just wondering, in the early days, you said that there wasn't a lot of publisher and zine fairs and whatnot. So I'm just curious, what was the process for getting your hands on artwork that wasn't necessarily local?
I didn't understand the question.
Just like before it was possible to like go to the store and just simply buy these comics and buy this art, how did you manage to get your hands on artists who weren't necessarily like from your city and from your area? Like you talk about French art, and I'm just wondering how easy was it for you to get those comics?
At the time, there was this magazine, American magazine that existed, which was called Fact Sheet 5. It was a catalog of fanzines, if you like, fanzines of poetry, comics, political, everything. So you would send your own fanzine with a description and your return address and the price of your comics, and they would print a little ad. And that's how I got my orders, and that's how I made friends, because I ordered quite a lot of fanzines, and I even, that's how I met my publisher in France. I made friends with John Porcelino that way. It was super exciting, and also it involved a lot of mail art. It was absolutely fantastic. That's how it happened, and I guess that's how I eventually got published and went in the magazine Weirdo as well, from word to mouth. All my mail.
The Beguiling bookstore that runs the Toronto Comics Art Fest has been around for a long, long, long time, since like 88, I think, or 89. So that's where I would get my stuff. So before it was Peter Bergmo and Christopher Butcher, it was Steve Solomos and Sean, I'm going to forget his name right now. Yes, Sean. So that's where I would find comics-wise, but also there used to be amazing bookstores in Toronto. I know we're in Hamilton right now, but in Toronto there was David Mirvish art books, there was Pages, there was the St. Rosedale Library, and there were art books there, and zines, and comics at a few of these locales, and of course we don't have any of those stores anymore, except for the Beguiling. Still there, and there's type books, and there's secondhand books like Alpha books. So, and there's a great bookstore here in Hamilton. Call out your name.
City and City Books.
Yes, great books, and there's comics and graphic novels there, and a new and used.
New and used, yes.
Excellent store. Thank you. So yeah, maybe that international trickling in is great. Who knows?
Are there any other questions?
Okay, I think, well, thank you, Alana, thank you, Fiona, thank you, Julie. Can we hear our appreciation for our wonderful guests? My hope is that, I don't know if you've seen the publication for this series, it's an amazingly beautiful book. They do have them in the shop. I hope the shop might be still open. If you'd like to get a copy and then get it signed, you can probably do that. Barring that, as Alana mentioned, we do have sort of the second component of this Comics in Conversation talk on November 27th, 28th, 27th? I'm not looking at you like you know. 28th, Thursday, and that will be Chester Brown, Seth, and Joe Ullman will be moderating that panel. In between that, on October 20th, as part of the AGH Film Festival, we have 1 p.m. and a 4 p.m. performance of the opening sequence from Clyde Fans, which is Seth's latest illustrated book. When they launched that book, Drawn and Quarterly worked with Derek Boys, a director from Soul Pepper, and an actor named William Webster. He's a Hamilton Board actor who's also associated with Soul Pepper, and they took the opening sequence of that book and made a sort of mini theatrical presentation. We're really proud that they decided to restage it as part of the film festival. That's October 20th. And the exhibition's on until January, and I think that does it. Thank you so much for coming tonight, and as always, thank you for supporting the Art Gallery.